All right, welcome back here, season 5 of the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast. We are continuing to do this. We're continuing to have coaches from around the country, around the world sometimes, here on the podcast. We're super excited to just continue bringing you value, continue uplifting and honoring coaches around the country. And we're excited about this one. This is one of those, if you've listened to a few episodes here, there's some guests that come on. I've known them for years and decades, maybe even have coached with them back in one of those former lives of mine. And then there's other coaches that actually are kind of a little bit of my more favorite ones. They're ones that I actually don't know or don't know all that well. And it gives me a good chance to get to know them. So I'm super excited today. Help me welcome the head coach from Heidelberg University, the wise, the wonderful Mr. Bill Cooper. Bill, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. We're finished finals last week, so getting a chance to kind of relax and recharge.
And we're going to learn you used to be one of those kids in finals at Heidelberg.
I did.
Spoiler alert, we got an alum here, which I love that. I wanted to bring that up right off the bat because I truly do have just a soft spot in my heart for alums coaching at their alma mater. It's something that's just so precious to me. When you go to recruit and you're telling a recruit how great the school is and, this and that, you lived it. You're not just there because you got a paycheck and you're there. You've lived the undergrad experience there at Heidelberg, man. So that's really cool. I love that very, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's even funny because some of the kids that are on the team now actually have some professors that I had back in the day. I graduated in 96. So we have the conversation all the time. Coaches say it all the time. I've been in your shoes. Well, I've literally have had a chance to be in their shoes in the same class with some of the same professors. So it's been kind of surreal to a certain extent to be able to come back to the alma mater. But actually, my roommate from college sent me a text the first week I was on campus back here working. And he's like, "What's it like to be back in your office and back there recruiting?" And it was 9 o'clock and it was a Tuesday night and it was first week of May. I still remember it was like no one was around. And that text came through, and the first word that popped in my head was just surreal. Like I hadn't given it a whole lot of thought up until that point, but it was just surreal that I was actually back here doing the job for a place that was so important for me way back in the day. So
I'm kind of jumping, not jumping around, but I'm kind of jumping ahead here. We're going to backtrack here in a second, but I was wondering, because I'm trying to think of my own alma mater. So I went to Troy University, and when I go back on campus, and I graduated in 2000, so not far off of where you were, and it's different. Like even where I lived is no longer there. It's now an academic building, which trust me, I did not live in an academic building. Some of the athletic facilities are upgraded. I mean, it's almost like a whole new campus. Did you experience that when you came back and it's like, oh man, that over there, that's where science used to be. And now it's a parking lot, or, this is where my dorm is. And now it's a basketball arena.
well, it's been fun because there's a lot of the same stuff is here that was here 30 years ago, with a lot of upgrades over the years. But there's a lot of new places, some new dorms, new housing options that we didn't have back in the day when I was here. But just all the changes and all of the similarities, the thing that kind of really got me when I was back on campus for the interview, and even since I've been back here working, is just the personality of the place has kind of stayed the same. Like the town, the personality has stayed the same. The people on campus has kind of stayed the same. So I don't know if that's kind of somewhere like that you've experienced too, and you've gone back to your alma mater, but it was, you still had that, it felt familiar kind of thing. Whenever you take a new job and you go somewhere else, you understand like the ins and outs of what you're supposed to do, but it always is a little bit different. And I'm far enough removed from Heidelberg as a student athlete that coming back, I don't have that like shock that sometimes kids have when they graduate and then they turn around and they start working right for their school. They're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know this is how things worked.
Right. Yeah, I think
I'm far enough away from it now.
I think you're describing culture. The culture of the school still
Absolutely.
fits from when you were there. And that's what attracted it to you, I assume, we'll learn as an undergrad and now back as a professional in this sport as well. So,
Yeah, I had actually chose to come to Heidelberg before I talked to a single coach when I was in high school.
really?
Um, I was bio pre-med, and the strange thing that's going to sound odd that sold me on the school is they had a cadaver lab on campus. So, but a small Division III school in Ohio that had that as an opportunity for an undergrad student to get your hands on right away. That was really cool for me, and that was one of the reasons that I ended up deciding to come to school here. And then once I decided, some of my buddies in high school were talking about going to college and playing sports, and I'm like, I wonder if that's going to be a possibility. So I reached out to the soccer coach because I'd played soccer since I was 4. And I reached out to the track coach because I started running track in middle school and ended up getting a chance to play both while I was here in college, while I was still a bio student. Um, Played soccer all 4 years, ran track all 4 years, had a little bit of a different track career because I was a distance runner growing up through high school. And then I ended up being a sprinter, 400 runner, primarily in college. So it was interesting kind of to see how that all changed. But
Well, let's back up. We got a little bit of prehistory. That's good. I love that. That actually really helps a guy like me who has to set up these questions. That's awesome. So let's talk about that high school career, Bill. You mentioned kind of soccer guy all your life, and then track guy from middle school and on. Talk to us a little bit about both but obviously we stay a little bit more focused on the track side here. What was your high school career like? And what I don't mean necessarily, PRs and stuff. You mentioned you're a distance runner, things like that, but what was like the relationship of you and coach? Were you, it doesn't sound like, based off of what we know, you went into Major Heidelberg, doesn't sound like coaching was necessarily a path for you at that time, but where was coaching at in your mind during this athletic career, high school athletic career?
So growing up in high school, to be perfectly honest, I did track to just stay in shape for soccer, for the most part. And it was something I was decent at. I wasn't great. Worked hard, had some good friends, and we ran and had fun with it. Grew up, was a Columbus public school kid, Columbus, Ohio. Went to Northland High School, played soccer all 4 years, did a bunch of things. And then senior year, because I was a distance runner for the track season, didn't really have an indoor season way back then. So it was just kind of unorganized during the winter season until we got into the spring. And then my senior year, the cross country coach came to me and said, Bill, we need somebody else to run because we don't think we're going to have enough to field a team. So, like, but I'm in soccer. And so we kind of had the conversation that I could still play soccer, go to all the soccer practices, but if there was a cross country race that didn't conflict with soccer, then I would run in those. So I ended up doing that my senior year, ran cross country, played soccer, somehow managed to balance both at the same time while I was in the marching band, symphonic band, all the other stuff. And the traditional college or cross country track kid that gets over involved in too many things. Um, but then, so I kind of finished out my senior year, had talked to the coaches at Heidelberg, decided to come play soccer. And then my freshman year, there was a new track coach that got hired here. Larry Brown actually just got inducted this past fall into our Hall of Fame here at Heidelberg. So it was really fun. He didn't know anybody from anybody. So we were sitting in his office and he's, well, what's your background? What's your history? And I kind of looked at him and said, oh, we're going to pretend I never ran track before. I said, well, why? I said, because I don't want you to make me an 800 runner or a distance runner. So I had enough of that. I think I want to go somewhere different. So we kind of talked it through and we settled on, I thought the 400 would be the area that I was going to be best at. And ended up working out for me pretty well. I made it to nationals a couple of times. Senior year was an All-American Division III. But at the crux of it is a lot of the way I coach now is he gave us the opportunity to do things. We worked really hard and I worked super hard because I wasn't going to let him make me an 800 runner, which he really wanted me to be. But then once I graduated with my undergrad, I decided along the way I wasn't going to go to med school because that had been the plan all through high school, all through college. And I made the decision I didn't feel like that was the direction I needed to go. And moved to Dayton, was in grad school there and had a friend that coached over at Wilmington College, Ron Combs, who's still the head coach there now. He was actually an assistant coach at Heidelberg my sophomore year, and me and his brother raced against each other in college. So I went over and kind of helped Ron part-time coaching for about a year or so, year and a half. Got out of it a little bit just because of time constraints and was miserable. Didn't know why at the time, but I was miserable.
Let's pause there. First of all, I love that I did not know your history involved Ron Combs. Love him to death. That's awesome. Go back to high school before you went into Heidelberg there. we really like to kind of dissect coaches and what makes not what makes one coach successful and another one non-successful, because they're all successful in regards to positively impacting young people.
Mhm.
You had a pretty unique uh, experience there. So you were coached by one coach in soccer. You were
Yep.
coached by a different person in track, maybe a different person in cross country, or were those two the
Yep.
same?
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned band and things like that. And, band director is very much like a coach. I know it's not necessarily in our track and field wheelhouse, but, my son's doing band now in middle school, and I watch how they interact. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh man, you take away the drums and tell them repeat 400s or something. It's no different. It's a coach, what they're doing here. What was your experience with their coaching style? There's some coaches that are more authoritarian, yelling and bossy. I don't know I'm from Alabama. I can't say, what is that word? Um,
Authoritarian.
Thank you very much. That's
There we
a
go.
that's
There
a
we go.
Heidelberg grad versus a Troy
I'm
grad
telling
right
you.
there. Yeah, that was good. Some are more collaborative,
Hmm.
coming alongside you. How were your coaches, and which one did you kind of maybe more be attracted to? Like, oh, I kind of liked when coach was hard on me, or when coach was, nice to Bill.
See, I think over the course of like middle school, high school, all of the coaches that I had, I mean, different personalities, different sports, even. I mean, you look at a team sport versus the quote unquote individual sport, there's going to be some differences in just the overarching way that you're coached. I think at the end of the day, they were all authentic
Mm,
in their own different ways. My soccer coach, was not an American coach in high school. He had come from, and I can't even remember the country that he was from, but he brought a different style and a different perspective to the way the team was played during soccer. And all of it at the end of the day for them was, hard work, do your job, kind of work hard, work as a team, work as a unit. Um, and good things will happen. And our soccer team in high school was really, really good in the Columbus public schools. And then track, we had multiple coaches during the track season team. Al Simpson was the head coach. Um, Tom was the distance coach. He worked with cross country too. Steve Call was the cross country coach for Northland. And then we had a couple of assistant coaches that the names are escaping me right now. But at the end of the day, it was the same kind of thing. Like it was, you were valued as a person and you were supported that way to try to improve and do the best you can. It wasn't necessarily results driven, so to
mhm,
speak, as it was, supportive, more of a supportive kind of an environment, putting you in positions to try to succeed and try to improve and try to, do your best for whatever the best means,
mhm.
so to speak. It's a little different. We had some varying degrees of kids that were on the team. Had some really, really good kids that ended up going Division 1 soccer or track wise and soccer wise. We had some, Division 3 kids along the way, and some kids that were just stoked for the free gear and to be able to participate and be part of something. So kind of to be able to balance all of those different things in high school is, looking back at it now, like that's really impressive that as a high school coach, because you have so many different responsibilities to so
Mhm.
many different kids,
Right.
um, to be able to balance that in a way that it was a positive experience for me. And I think I got into coaching because of, track in the way that Larry was really supportive of the program, because my freshman year we were really bad
Yeah.
here at Heidelberg.
Lot
So,
of lot of sympathy for high school coaches, a lot of empathy, I should say, for high school
oh yeah.
coaches. You nailed it. I've always talked about, they are also teachers, typically, spouses, family,
Hmm. Hmm.
oh, and by the way, and coach track and maybe coach another sport along the way as
Yeah.
well. You broke it down really well, actually, Bill, there. On the team itself, you've got kids who, are really serious and dedicated about it. You got guys like me that
Hmm.
were like, hey man, do I get a shirt? That's awesome. Let's go. And everything in between. How do you manage that with the
Yeah.
amount of events that we have? By the way, they're
Right.
understaffed, et cetera. So that was really good. When you mentioned you went to Heidelberg without even visiting, why Heidelberg, and why it doesn't sound like coaching was necessary. It sounded like you were on the medical path. You're going to become Dr.
Hmm.
Cooper
Yep.
here.
Yep.
What made you choose Heidelberg? What made you choose Heidelberg without even going there? And why becoming a doctor? Is this a family thing? What was your thought process there?
It's one of those things that growing up as a kid, wanted to be a doctor,
Mhm.
and kind of through high school wanted to be a doctor. And here in Ohio, Kent State, Akron, and Youngstown had a accelerated undergrad program for med school, and you went through your 4 years in two, and then you went on to med school for 4 years, and it was always an intriguing opportunity. There was actually a girl that graduated a year or two ahead of me from Heidelberg that got into that program. So I kind of had an idea of what it was, but it was super selective. I think they only took 50 new people at each of the three schools each year into the program, but it was also a very, very strenuous program. I got accepted into one of the three. I can't remember which one of the schools I got accepted into, but I would have started college literally a week to the day after I graduated from high school. And I'm like, yep, I want to be a doctor, but I don't know that I want to be a doctor like in June after I graduated high school. And as I was doing my college search, I ran into, the big college fairs, and Heidelberg College was one of the schools that was there at the time. And I still remember the admissions counselor, Megan Lemon, who was there, very personable, great to talk to, lots of phone calls, lots of conversations. I visited campus, loved the campus. And on our way home back to Columbus, I knew this was where I was going to end up going to school. But then as my senior year kind of progressed, that was where kind of sports, like, I wonder if I can make this work. Because it had never really been anything that I had thought about much up until that point. So, but just the feel of the people on campus, it was like a genuine feel. People were excited to talk to you. People you could tell were engaged in what they were doing, cared about what they were doing, and who they were doing it with and for, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It was not a giant lecture hall taught by a grad assistant that was just there getting a degree, and you're in a classroom with 400 other kids. I was smart enough to know I was a good student, but to go to a big school like Ohio State or any of the schools of that size was not going to end up well for me.
Mm.
I didn't want to get lost in the shuffle, I guess.
And you did the opposite of what is the more traditional track path. I used to joke, everybody moves up a level in college. If you were a sprinter, you're now a mid-distance runner, mid-distance or distance. And, eventually, high school 2 milers, I guess, automatically go to the marathon. Eventually you keep growing, keep going
Yep,
up. You're just going
yep,
to keep
yep.
going. And the poor shot putters, too bad. You just stay a shot putter. And if you're a guy, you move up 4 pounds of it, and girls just keep the 4K. You
Yep.
went the opposite. What,
Hmm.
why? I guess my first question is, why didn't you do that in high school? Why weren't you sprinting in high school? Because it obviously, you talk about being a D3 All-American for credit. This obviously worked out here. Every distance coach right now is going, yeah, but think how good he would have been in the 800. That's what
Oh
every
yeah,
that's what every
absolutely.
distance coach is thinking. But why didn't that happen in high school? Why didn't you sprint in high school? And how did you have the fortitude to tell coach, yeah, coach, I'm not sure the 800. We need to start with the 400. Let's go there. That's a pretty, I don't want to say, that's a very chutzpah comment for an
Uh-huh.
18-year-old to
Yep.
make to a coach.
Yep. So I think it goes back to I didn't do it in high school for track, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I was
why
viewing
though?
I don't know. For whatever reason, I enjoyed what I was doing, but I wasn't necessarily as passionate about
Okay.
doing it because I had done soccer for so long. My identity started at 4 years old
Right.
with soccer. So I had just always connected to that
Yeah,
with soccer, and track was something else that I did.
you're a soccer guy doing track.
Yeah, in high
Yeah.
school I was. Absolutely I was. But then when I got to college, and I was always the fastest one on the soccer team. Like I knew I had some speed. I knew I was fast. I knew I had good endurance from playing 90-minute games. And it was a want to, I think,
Mm.
more than anything. It was a mentality change. I ran a couple 4x4s in high school. I ran, an open one here and there, but it was not, I was more like the 4x8, 800 was kind of the direction that coaches always put me in because there was more of the need, I guess, there to fill spots in the mile, 2 mile, whatever. It varied from meet to meet. But for me, the mentality really changed when I got to college.
Mm.
I was excited to try the 400 or sprinting, I guess, long sprints more specifically, than anything. And my coach, I think Larry, he recognized, okay, well, let's give it a try. So it was more of a collaborative experience than it was, you're going to do what I'm going to tell you you're going to do, and you're
Mm.
not going to be on the team if you decide you wanted to do otherwise. He tried a number of times to get me to be more of an 800 guy, but it was I had enough, I think, in high school of that, and I just didn't have that same zeal, that same passion for it as I did for the 400. And even for me, my favorite event was indoors. We did the 500 in our conference in the OAC, and I was just crazy enough to like the 500 more than anything else because I had the conditioning from soccer, I had the speed, so the 800 guys that would come down and run the 500, I usually had a little bit more speed than they did. And then for the sprinters that would move up to the 500, I usually had a little bit more of an endurance because of soccer background. So that was my favorite indoor race, the 500, and it just was different. It just was different.
How do you think coach, because there's a delicate balance, and now you can look back and have perspective on this. You were an
Mm-hmm.
18-year-old, so you
Mm-hmm.
certainly probably weren't able to see it right in front of you. But coach, like, he had some choices there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it seems
Right,
like he took
right.
the very collaborative
Mm-hmm.
fork in the road. But coach also has a responsibility of, like, okay, I know this kid wants to sprint, but man, he can be a really good half mile or even miler. How do my job is to make him the best for the team. How do I get him to go here? He really wants to go here. Now you look back and you've coached many, many kids
Mm-hmm.
throughout the
Yep.
time now,
Yep.
and maybe have had that situation where kids come
Yep.
in and said, yeah, coach, I know you think I'm an 800-meter runner, but I'm really a shot putter or what, something crazy. And you're like, all right, well, gosh, coach took a chance on me. I got to at least take a chance.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think he handled that, the responsibility of, I've been doing this for a while. I want to do what's best for you, but okay, I do believe in a collaboration relationship between coach and athlete here as well.
I think so. My freshman year, the team at Heidelberg was not very good. It was not very big, very small roster size, very, very limited in the number of athletes that we had that were competing. And I think if I were to jump into his psyche, he probably was looking at it more of, I need to keep kids on the team. So we're going to allow them to have some input possibly, or he saw in practices how practices went. He's like, okay, maybe he's not off his rocker. This might be something that he could excel in. I always tend to joke, if it's one of my cross country kids comes in and says, hey coach, I really want to be a shot putter, we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss some of your life choices, because this isn't the first bad one you've made.
That's good. That's good. Let's talk about life in general, because you
Right,
obviously are
right,
making some other mistakes here.
right. So and over the years, like you hit the nail on the head. I've had kids that have come in that have said, coach, I really want to do this. And we have a conversation about it. And we're like, okay, we're going to give it a try. Usually freshman year is the time that we let them kind of experiment a little bit more than any other time, or when it's my first year taking over a program.
Mhm.
Um, but then we kind of start to build that understanding. Here's what we want to do as a program. Here's what you want to do as an athlete. How do we find a way to get on that common ground? And sometimes we'll have that conversation where I'll see something that somebody's going to be great at, and we'll have that talk, like, how about we do this? And sometimes they're all in, like, absolutely, I'm on board, coach. Other
Mhm.
times, like, yeah, that's not the direction that I want to go. So sometimes, being Division 3 guy, my whole career has been at Division 3. Sometimes it's about the experience.
Mhm.
And I know from personal experience that if it's something that I'm excited to do, I'm more than likely going to work harder at it.
Right.
So if I see that you're going to be better at one event that I think you could be a national champion in, but you don't have any desire at that, it's going to cause a lot of issues and friction along the way.
Mhm.
Whereas we can focus on where your thoughts are and just maximize as much out of that experience as we can. And do we leave a little bit on the table sometimes? Probably.
Right.
But I think the overall culture is better. The overall experience, not just for that athlete, but for everybody, is
Mhm.
sometimes a little bit better. But you're going to have a lot of those kids. And I've had a lot of those kids over the years that have bought all in. And I had one kid when I was coaching at Colby, was a state champ in the hurdles. He was a decent hurdler. He was just stupid fast. And we sat down and we were talking about what his goals were, and he said he wanted to be an All-American. I said, well, if that's what you want to do, we're going to quit hurdling. And I was really young in my career, and Xavier looked at me. He's like, what do you mean? And so we kind of talked through it. He's like, okay, I buy in. And he ended up being a national qualifier All-American in the 400. Still, I think has a school record to this day. Was a national qualifier All-American, I think, in triple jump, long jump. Um, but to have that conversation as a young coach back then, I was like, I think you could be really, really good at these things as opposed to wanting to do something because you were really good at it in high school. Um, but yeah, I think those are always difficult but fun conversations to have, especially when the kids buy in. You can tell the ones that are like, oh yeah, absolutely. I just want to be the best that I can be.
Yeah, the one of the many superpowers of coaches is being able to see something in others before they can see it in themselves. And so to be able to identify that, the issue that we have sometimes, now we're talking about the coach down, like you gave that example there, Colby. Some of the problems that we have sometimes is we make our identity around something that is very superfluous. See, there's another word I can't. Superfluous. I got this one. He had his identity around hurdling at first.
Right.
And
Right.
then when it was like, oh, okay, if that's your real goal, then here's the path that, as a coach, I can see us taking. He had to break off that, oh, I'm a hurdler, and put a different identity, like, oh, okay, I'm a track athlete, triple jump, 400, etc.
Yeah.
Here with you going into Heidelberg, this was a little bit less coach seeing something in you before you could see it in yourself. This is a little bit more of the betting on yourself. This was a little bit of like, all right, I think I can be a sprinter here. I'd like to try that. And he probably also had a little bit, we're also putting ourselves in someone else's shoes here. He probably also had a little bit of the like, okay, we'll go ahead and try that. And if it doesn't work, by the way, that's still going to help you out for that half mile that I really think you should be running.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
like, I'll just wait Bill out. We'll get him over to the half mile. And then you got too good, and it was like, all right, well, we're going to stick to the quarter. As you ended your career there at Heidelberg as an All-American, by the way, bravo. Seemed like, I believe you said something like, yeah, I realized maybe I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to now go into medical school, et cetera. So you go down. So how did you mentioned Ron was coaching at Heidelberg, so you knew Ron that way. Is that how you got down to Wilmington to start helping out?
Yeah, Ron was here my sophomore year at Heidelberg as an assistant coach for Larry. And then he moved back to his alma mater at Wilmington to take over as an assistant, then ultimately ended up being the head coach. And they needed somebody after I graduated that would be able to come over and help out with their sprinters a little bit. And so he asked me if I'd be interested in come over helping out, and I did that for about a year with him.
What were you thinking career-wise here, though? Seems like you're done.
Honestly,
I'm not
no
going to be
idea.
a doctor. It doesn't really sound like, I was gonna say, it doesn't really sound like you're committed to being a coach. You're kind of in this fluid moment here.
I was really trying to figure out a whole lot of life at that point. I graduated my first full-time job. I was working in retail after I graduated as I was going to grad school. And then I moved over, was working in children's services in a foster home.
Wow.
Here in Ohio, working with juvenile boys that had been awarded to the state. A little bit of social work. So I did that for a couple of years. I did personal training off and on a little bit along the way. But I think at the end of the day, it was always just helping people. Like that's the one thing, like when I sit down and I kind of look through everything, it was always kind of being able to help, whether it's mentor, whether it's steer, whether it's correct, whatever. People kind of along the way. But yeah, I kind of fell into coaching. And once I got out of being a part-time coach with Ron, I was doing personal training for about 6 months. But something just was missing and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And there was a coaching convention up in Buffalo beginning one summer. And I went up and went through that, came back from that, and I'm like, okay, yep, this is what I want to do. I think it was one of the USATF level ones. It was like the 3 or 4 day thing. I went up, came back. I'm like, yep, this is what I want to do. Threw out a bunch of.
What happened? I mean, something had to have happened. Either
it was kind of. I think I figured out that's what I wanted to do. I found I was passionate about it. It was something that I really enjoyed. It meant a lot to me and who I was through college, I think. And it was reconnecting those dots, I guess, going up to the convention, being surrounded by people that this is what they wanted to do.
Like-minded people.
Yeah. And I had never really even thought about that as a career because way back then in the 90s, like the GA thing that exists now wasn't much of a thing at all. Right. So graduating as an undergrad and then going on to get a master's and being able to coach I think it existed, but I don't think nearly to the level that it does
Right.
now. So that was an opportunity that I didn't even know
Hmm.
I could churn into a full-time career, I think, coming out of college, to the point that I do now, that I look back, I'm like, oh, wow.
Isn't that interesting? You go to this clinic convention up in Buffalo. You could have easily not gone
Hmm.
to that. I mean, like easily, like, oh no, I need to go. I got another personal training session, or I'm just gonna chill at
Hmm.
home for the
Hmm.
weekend for crying out loud. And yet that sets you on this path. Like now we're on the now we're
Oh,
starting
yeah.
to go on the path here. We've actually kind of we see all these paths in front of us, and now it is narrowed down. Like, okay, I see this one path here.
Hmm. Yep. I was trying to see if I had the level one certificate still up on my wall,
Oh
to see what
man.
year it was, but I think it
Yeah.
was 99, summer of 2000.
Wow.
I think that's when kind of the light bulb went off, as this
Yeah.
is what I want to do. And then I started applying for any jobs that I could find, because the NCAA market didn't exist back then to the
Right.
point that it does now.
Right.
And found out Hartwick College was looking for a full-time assistant, upstate New York,
Okay.
kind of between Binghamton and Albany, Division III school. They were looking for a full-time assistant. I sent in all my application and ended up getting interviewed there. And was offered the job. So I was stoked to go to Oneonta, New York, for $10,000 for the entire year. And it was probably one of the most fun first full-time jobs I've ever had, because there were just three coaches. We had a football coach that worked with our throwers, but Joe Dombrowski was the head cross country and track coach. Took a chance, hired me. Didn't have a ton of experience. We had a chance. I was only there for the year, but we had some really, really good kids that we worked through. I remember shoveling the track in the middle of winter in New York up there, because we didn't have an indoor track. Or we drove up to Cooperstown and ran on some banked 150 jogging track. Uh, we just made do with what we had and made the most of it. You know.
So what's that like your first coaching job? You volunteered down at Wilmington, but this is your first, I almost hesitate to call it paid. But you got some quarters to be there.
Yep. Yep.
It's one thing to be an athlete. It's one thing to be an athlete who knows they want to be a coach, which is not your situation. But even those people, it's still different. Even though you're paying attention to coaching a little different when you know you want
Hmm.
to be a coach. You didn't have that path, but now you are in the coach's seat. So you're writing
Hmm.
workouts,
Yep.
administrating them, correcting, encouraging. What was it like that first time? That first, I kind of like visually think of like, okay, here's your whistle, even though most of us don't use whistles or anything. I still remember my first coaching job. My head coach like whips a whistle over to me, like, I was 20 yards away. I remember catching it and just like one continuous motion right back to him. I was like, yeah, I'm loud enough. I don't need a whistle. But I kind of think of that like, here's your whistle. You're officially a coach.
Hmm.
How was that? You're on a different side. You're not an athlete anymore. You're not a volunteer. You are
Right.
assistant coach Cooper here. What was that experience like?
Eye-opening,
Mm,
I think. You don't sometimes, I think, understand like what goes into planning not just a single workout for a single
right.
person, but managing all of the ins and outs of working with a program. Whether it's writing workouts, setting up recruiting calls, the number of hats that we wear daily, admissions counselors, academic counselors, just counselors in general,
Yep.
dealing with everything on a day-to-day basis. And then the administrative side of things, putting in the expense reports and making sure you have buses and vans and food and everything
Right.
else. And especially for me coming up to New York, where I'd never been before,
Mm,
coaching at any of these competitions. Like you'd hear of some of the schools along the way, but going to these new meets with new coaches and new athletes, and it was an experience, eye-opening, I guess, experience,
mm,
where every day it was something new that we were dealing with, that I was dealing with specifically. So I really just tried to sit down and learn as much as I could every day, whether it was, okay, what are we doing this workout for? Why are we doing this? So that way, what I figured is when the kids would ask me, why are we doing this? If I didn't have an answer, you're going to lose them at that point. They're not going to want to listen anymore. They're not going to think you know anything. So you want to make sure that when you're saying something and you're conveying, whether it's the workout or it's a rep in the weight room, or why are we doing these exercises. You really wanted to make sure that as a young coach, I understood the why to it. So it wasn't just, well, because I was told this is what we're doing. Yeah. So, I think that was the big thing, but kind of back to the crux of, just everything is I just I loved what I was doing because I was actually getting a chance to do something that was, really fun for me in college, and help other people kind of learn and grow. And, okay, you're at a meet, you're super anxious. How did I deal with it? How are some things, kind of not necessarily being the best coach in the world, but trying to be the most supportive person I could be to help them to be able to achieve what they wanted to do.
In real life, not coaching life, when
There's
we
another life outside of coaching.
yeah, exactly. That's what I need more coaches to realize. Exactly right, Bill. When we start going into the professional world, maybe we work retail, so we get a little taste of retail, and maybe we don't
Mhm,
necessarily like running a cash register, but we go, oh wow, I do love the environment of retail. Maybe I could
mhm,
be a store manager or regional managers, etc. Or we go work into restaurant, and maybe we don't like necessarily being a waiter, but we like, oh man, I love what restaurant industry is, so I'm going to be go into that industry. When we get into coaching, it's rare, my experience, that someone does a year of coaching and says, "Oh, yeah, it's okay. This is I can't see myself doing it 40 years."
mhm.
They just all of a sudden wake up and they've been in the industry for 40 years. It just seems to always go like you just kind of
Yeah.
you look past all the sometimes negative sides of the profession. Some of that being pay, by the way, other being paperwork. We're not all,
Mhm.
I've yet to meet
Right.
a coach who told me they got into coaching because they loved the administrative side. Some learn to love the administrative side, but very few say, "Oh yeah, I want to coach track not because
Mhm,
I want to be out in the sand pit, because I want to be in the office turning in grade
mhm,
reports and call logs and all that kind of stuff." But we tend to like overcome those things and continue on because we love
mhm.
the sport, we love working with young people, and we love the actual coaching impact of it. Did you said eye opening, which I love. That's a really good descriptor because you start talking about all the other things, not just the call it 2 hours that you're on the track.
Right.
Was there ever a time during that year where you're like, because you had an easy out, it was just your first year,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
had other experiences in a hefty degree here, so there's like easily like, okay, I'll just go over here into this industry,
Mhm.
healthcare, teaching or something else. Was there any time during that first year where it was like, oh yeah, this is great, this is fun, but nah, this ain't me, or was it like the Spider-Man bug bit you and you're like, oh yeah, no, I am Coach Cooper. I'm no longer Bill anymore. I am
Yeah.
Coach Cooper.
Absolutely. I think you as early as that convention, that clinic that I went
Mm,
to, like I went to that when I came home from that, I knew
wow.
this was where I needed to go and what I needed to do. Not because I was trying to be like the best coach ever
Mhm.
coaching, but it just felt like the direction that I could have the most impact with people along the way. It's good, bad, indifferent, whatever you go through as a coach. But I think at the end of the day, I'm a people person, and being able to work with the thing that I really enjoy. And I tell the kids all the time, no matter what my day is, practice is the best part of my day.
Mm.
Like I'm still a little kid when it comes to practice. Like I bounce around, I hop around, I'll do wickets or whatever with them every once in a while, just to show them that I'm old and I can still do it. Um, but that's the best part of my day because that's when we get to interact the most with the kids.
Mhm.
It's my home, it's my happy place, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. But I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is just the new faces that come through all the time, and I can see different personalities because this is 25 years I think of doing this at this point. Um, Different faces and different names, but the same personality for kids that I coached 20 years ago. Like, oh,
Mm.
I had a kid that was just like you.
And
Like,
and
is
he,
that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm like, we'll let you know.
you're like, and he's your dad because I've been coaching that long. What before we go where do you went next, I'm curious. You described your identity as a soccer player who ran track.
Mhm,
Why
mhm.
track over soccer? You could have gone into soccer coaching.
I think it's because of what I saw Coach Brown, Larry, do with the track program when I was here. It went from really, really small my freshman year. The amount of himself and his family that he poured into the program, and then the improvement that I saw over the program during my 4 years. And I think they won a conference championship 2 or 3 years after I graduated. I think just the impact that he made and the belief, I think more than anything, that he had in me to be able to do something really resonated, versus, I identified as a soccer player forever, and I even had a chance to play during college, and after I graduated from college I still continued to play some. And Coach Haley was the soccer coach. He was also here at Heidelberg for a long time. He was just at one of the soccer games this past fall, and we had a chance to catch up. And
That's
I mean,
cool.
he was a great coach. He had great teams. And I loved my experience in the soccer program, but I think there was just something that kind of struck a chord with me with track,
Hmm.
and more the individual relationship as opposed to the team dynamic.
Hmm.
Even though we are still a team, it's a lot of the team is developed and built on everybody, not
Yeah.
just, you could have a star point guard on the basketball team and you're going to have a great team,
Right.
or, you got a star quarterback that wins all the games for you guys. It was so much individualized
Hmm.
that a lot of kids sometimes shy away from
Hmm.
with our sport. But it just the belief, I think, is really the big thing that Larry had in us to improve and be the best version of ourselves during our time on the team here. I think that's really what propelled me, I think, into the track, because I was also an assistant soccer coach for a while at my next stop after
Okay.
Hartwick. So
I'm always curious about that. I was a football player slash track athlete in high school. And when I went to call the local high school to volunteer, and I ended up being an assistant coach, but I never even thought about coaching or calling the football coach. I don't know why. I was actually probably
yeah.
I'd probably a little bit better football player than track athlete, because I was really a bad track athlete. But I wasn't like I wasn't one of these guys that, well, back then we only really had Runner's World. I didn't read like every magazine. I wasn't like
Hmm.
so invested in track. I just didn't have the genetics. I didn't have the genetics and wasn't all that, crazy about track and field, but loved football. I grew up in Alabama. So, by law, I
Oh,
had to, yeah. And, but I remember when I called De La Salle High School, it was not even remotely in my head of like, oh, I'll call the head football coach and just see if they need a helper 2 days a week. So that's what I was calling the track coach for. Like, oh, do you 2 days a week? That's
mhm.
what, my days off from work. Do you need a helper? Never crossed my mind. And now I look back, after 20, 30 years ago, and I think, oh man, what if I'd have called the football coach? Like, I could be one of these fired football coaches for millions of dollars a year. Like, man, maybe I asked for the wrong extension instead of, I don't know. Maybe, never know. Okay, so you do New York, Aniana, New York, 1 year.
Yep. Yep.
Where and why do we go somewhere next?
So Colby College up
Okay,
in Maine.
Maine. Mhm.
And then, yep. I was at another coaching clinic that summer between jobs. So it was 2000, 2001. I was at Hartwick. They had some budget cuts, so they cut some of the assistant coaches out of the budget. I was at level 2 St.
Now,
Thomas.
now they didn't save very much by cutting that assistant
Yeah,
coach
right,
spot here.
right.
Now that's a little
Uh,
oxymoron there.
but I was at a level 2 clinic over in St.
Yeah.
Thomas, over in Minneapolis,
Hmm.
and couple of folks were there who had connections with Colby, knew they were looking for an assistant coach. And so again, after that, I reached out to the coaches at Colby. Deb and Jim Westcott had been there forever, and literally flew from St. Thomas back to Ohio to my parents' house, drove up to New York, dropped my stuff like 2 days later, drove all the way over to Maine, interviewed, and it was kind of the end of the month. They interviewed me and said, "Well, we'll let you know." And I kind of looked at him. I said, "Well, how soon are you going to let me know? Because my rent is up at the end of the month. I'm either moving back to Ohio or to wherever my next job's going to be." So they're like, "Well, how soon do you have to leave?" I'm like, "I drove. I can leave whenever." Uh, so ended up getting offered the job. Was an assistant coach at Colby. Was there for 3.5 years. I was an assistant soccer coach and track coach to kind of make it a little
Mm.
bit more of a full-time gig while I was there, and had a ball because I mean obviously they're two of my sports that I was involved with forever, was the head JV soccer coach for the men's program at Colby. So that was fun, getting a chance to, work with some of those kids that maybe aren't the varsity level or more the freshmen that are coming into college. And then with track, I was the sprints coach, so I got to work with all the sprints and hurdlers. We had Deb and Jim that were the head coaches that worked with their groups and their different events. Had a couple of throws coaches, so a little bit larger of a staff. Had an opportunity to, kind of focus and really get my feet wet with coaching my kids my way, I guess. They gave me the latitude to build my workouts, to do what we wanted to with them, and had a chance to work with some really, really good kids while I was there too, which was really fun.
During that 3.5, did you do soccer and track the whole 3.5 years
Yep.
there?
Yep. Yep.
How close did we come to losing you to soccer during that time? You're back. I don't want to say in your element, because you're in your element with track, but you did soccer since 4 years old. I mean, that's almost like
Yeah.
DNA
Yeah.
type aspect stuff here. How close did we end up losing you to the soccer route of coaching?
I think that was, if this is going to make any sense, the track side of things was my profession. The soccer side of things was more my enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like, it
Okay.
was more fun
Mhm.
working with the soccer because there was less pressure because I was
Mhm.
working with the
Mhm.
JV kids.
Mhm.
There's a lot of those post-secondary schools that are up in New England that you're playing, like those kids that are there doing a one-off before they
Right.
go to college.
Mhm.
That's what a lot of our JV schedule was, is
Mhm.
playing a lot of those post-secondary schools. And it was just fun. Like, I didn't have to run the entire soccer program. I just
Mhm.
ran, the JV kids.
Right.
And then track was, I guess, more of my professional job,
Yeah.
working with those kids during the indoor season, the outdoor season. Had a lot of hand in everything that all the sprint side of kids did. So, I mean, I think there was never a thought really that I was gonna, you know what, maybe I should shift over to soccer.
Mhm.
Um, because I think from a recruiting standpoint, I didn't enjoy the recruiting for the soccer side as much as I enjoyed the track side too, which I don't know that anybody really enjoys the recruiting side. But I think the soccer recruiting seemed to be so much more subjective. Like,
Mm.
you could have a really, really good player, but does he fit my system? Does he
Mm.
fit what we want to do as a program? Does he fit, in trying to take a square peg and put it in a round hole for
Right.
soccer versus you can see a track kid that, yeah, the times and the marks are one thing. It kind of gives us a springboard, but you can see how they compete. You can see how they interact with their teammates. You can
Mhm.
see what their program is from, that they're coming from. Are they underdeveloped?
Mm.
What do we have to work with? So I think from that standpoint, it was a little bit different from a recruiting standpoint from soccer versus track, that I enjoyed the track side of things a little bit more.
That's a good point. I used to way oversimplify track recruiting. It's like, hey, the 100 meter in high school is the exact same 100 meter in college. So if they
Yeah.
run X, they should be able to run a little bit better X. If
Yep.
I'm such a good coach here, where soccer, football, basketball,
Hmm.
you could have a in basketball 6'4" kid, but he's playing against nobody any
Yeah.
good. So he's
Yeah.
averaging 30. And it's like, oh yeah, that kid's not a D1 kid. I know he's averaging 30, but you get anybody who's a little good, he is going to fold,
Yep.
right? But you have
Yep.
to be able to see that, not just go on stats. Not that you need to just go on stats and track, because you need to know about the kid and
Right.
culture
Right.
and things like that. But that's really interesting about the two different recruiting aspects
Hmm.
there. Interesting. Um, you brought up coaching education a couple times now, which I love because I am a huge coaching
Hmm.
education advocate. You went to the St. Thomas one, which I almost went to. I didn't get to go to that one because I was the national junior high hurdle coach for USATF, and that was the
Okay.
exact same week was our junior elite
Mm,
camp out in Chula Vista. Because I just
gotcha. Okay.
distinctly remember going, oh, St. Thomas, Minnesota, like I want to go there, and it's like, yeah, same week, and I had to
Yeah.
make a decision, so I went to Chula Vista. California. Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
nice.
That's a rough place to be.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, pretty nice, pretty nice. What has coaching educate? I mean, you've given us a couple of really good examples of like, it set your passion up as far as your coaching, knowing that we don't get into X's and O's, but how has
Mhm.
coaching education furthered your passion, your knowledge, your skill set in this profession?
I think just getting a chance to hear what other people do.
Mm,
Because I think sometimes as coaches, we coach how we were coached along the way,
bingo.
for good, bad, or ugly.
Hmm.
That is, the way it always seems to be. And for me, I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. I'm not even close to knowing everything, but I'm always willing to listen and see what we can steal from other people
Hmm.
or other cues, or, hey, I'm dealing with this with one of my high jumpers. It's just those kind of those side conversations that take place a lot of times more than anything, and the relationships that you build along the way at the clinics and at the conventions. And I used to go to the MF one that was in
Hmm.
Atlantic City. I
Yeah,
went to
the
that one
All-Star.
forever
Mhm.
because it was cheap, it was convenient. 2.5 days, a ton of speakers every whatever hour and a half or whatever.
Hmm.
And then the USATF one, I've been to the USA Track and Field. I was at the High Performance one in Vegas
Wow.
one summer,
Yeah.
one
Uh-huh.
year. So I think just trying to learn as much as I can, and then how can we apply that to our kid?
Right.
You know, I don't have the Division 1 Baylor 400 runner,
Hmm.
but what do they do that might be able to translate to the kids that we do here at Division 3 schools and Heidelberg College, Heidelberg University?
Right.
What are the philosophies? What are the training differences? What are some things? And asking those questions too, like, why do you do this instead of this?
Right.
And then as a Division 3 coach along the way, we've had to do so many different things. Like, I was a sprinter, but I also ran distance. But how do I coach throwers? I never picked up anything.
Right.
Uh, my coach wouldn't let me be a jumper in college because I had bad hamstrings. So, I have to coach those things along the way.
Right.
And when I have coaches that coach them, I have to be able to help direct them that are new coaches. Let them get their feet wet, let them figure out their philosophy, how they want to do things. But also when they get stuck, being able to give them and pass them information along the way. And I tell people all the time, I'm not scared of stealing anything from anybody if I think it's
Hmm.
going to help my kids get better.
Right. What was your level two at St. Thomas in? Did you use sprints and hurdles?
I did sprints and hurdles.
Have you done
I've
others?
I've done endurance. I've done
Yeah.
sprints and hurdles. I've done jumps. I'm looking at
Yeah.
my wall.
Yeah.
USATF jumps.
Yeah.
And I've done strength and conditioning
Yeah.
through the Coaches Association now.
Right.
So I've tried to get into as many as I can
Yeah.
along the way.
When you did jumps, was that with Boo?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
That-
Boo is good. Boo is
Uh,
one of the.
uh, yeah. Well, when I finally was able to do level two, I was at Ball State and I
Mhm.
was going to be a sprints hurdles coach. That was what I was going to be. Like my whole goal was to make it to the SEC, and I was like, I will coach sprints and hurdles in the SEC. And so I put in for my first level two at Boise State, and I remember Mike Korn calling me up, and he was like, "Hey, Mike,
I was
uh,
out at Boise State.
is that right? Not for
Was
jumps, for jumps?
uh 2002 USATF 2002. No, I don't
Yeah,
know. What year was Boise State? That was USATF, not our coaches
right.
association one, was it?
USATF. I was at Ball State for the '02 and '03 season, so it would have been summer of '02 because
Oh, two. I was out
yeah.
there. Yep. For jumps. I did
Oh
jumps.
man.
Yep.
Well, you had the best class there ever was because that was class I was in. Because Mike Corn calls me up and says, "Hey, I know you put down sprints and hurdles, but it's full. But I have a slot for the jumps." And I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm not a jumps coach. Like more specifically, I'm a hurdles coach, right? That was my
Ah,
identity. And my identity was
yep.
I
Yep.
am a hurdles coach. That was the best event. That's what I do." And he goes, "Mike, you will learn a lot about sprints."
Hmm.
And trust me with Boo. And I don't know if I even knew who this sounds terrible. I don't know if I knew who Boo was, or I certainly
Right.
didn't know who Boo was at that point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I drove out, from Ball State, Muncie, Indiana, all the way out to Boise. And oh my goodness, like
Yeah.
the eyes just open, his real skill. I love Boo to death, mentor of mine. He's an amazing human being and friend. And, his skill is he's able to take very, very complex
Hmm.
ideas and dumb them down for me, for this guy.
Yep.
I remember and I never did, thank goodness for a lot of athletes. I never did coach pole vaulting, but I remember watching him, do his stick figures and show
Hmm.
me pole vaulting
Hmm.
out. And I remember walking out going, I think I can coach pole
I
vault.
can do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, thank God for a lot of athletes. I did not pursue that, but
Yeah.
that was an amazing class. We,
Yep.
we, we
Yeah.
had some really good people, like future use bills in that class that went on to do amazing things. It changed my life. Like literally
Hmm.
changed my life. How I coached, I went back to Ball State and oh my gosh, my kids got way better. And then, I made it to
Yeah.
Mississippi State and we did really well. It changed my life on how I look about education today. Sitting in
Yeah.
the position I sit in now, I think about education in general a lot differently because
Hmm.
of Boosh Exnader, man.
Well, and every time I'm at a convention and he's one of the speakers, I go to one of his. I've heard
100%.
his talks a ton of times, but every time I leave learning something new
Yep.
or reinforcing something that I
Yep.
thought I had heard before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it also reinforces so much of what other people say because you go to so many of these different talks at conventions or clinics, and so many people will reference Boo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
The Boo disciples, baby. Absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely,
Hey,
absolutely.
I tell everybody, if you're listening, this goes to you. If you are at a clinic, convention, it don't matter. If you are anywhere and Boo is speaking, and to Bill's point, I don't care what
Hmm.
he's speaking about. If he's talking about, because he can speak on anything, by the way. If he's talking about throwers, jumpers, sprinters, I don't care what event you coach. You go listen to him. You will learn something about your event, no matter what
Hmm.
if he's speaking about tiddlywinks, I want you to go because you're going to pick up something for your sprinters or jumpers or
Yep.
throwers. I mean, the guy is just absolutely amazing. It was so awesome. When we're recording this, we just got finished up with the USTF CCCA convention. And while I didn't get to go listen to Boo speak, I got to talk to my friend Boo for a while. And again, what a generous giver for our sport. What an
Oh, yeah.
education, an educator for our sport. It's really something precious we have with Boo Exnader. And we're all lucky to be in this timeline that we have him today. So take advantage of it. Because I know he's speaking at a lot of clinics this past here winter. So take advantage of that. That's awesome that you were at Boise, man. That's so cool. I love that. I love that. So thank you for talking about coaching education. Because again, I'm just
Hmm.
and because of Boo, I'm a big, just a huge, huge advocate of it. All right. So you go to Colby. Let's get back there. We're 3.5 years. You're doing
Yep.
soccer and track and field. We
Yep.
don't lose you
Yep.
to soccer. Thank goodness. And this was probably because we did Colby's indoor facility. Boy, time goes by strangely, maybe 10 years ago. So this was probably before they had an indoor
It
facility,
was.
or at least
So
the
they
indoor facility they
had
have
an,
today. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They had an indoor something. We could train on it. It was bomb proof, I think. But in Maine to have something to be able to train on, it was nice. It was
Yeah,
needed.
absolutely.
It was not the prettiest in the world, but it was functional. It did what we needed it to. And then we got a chance to go down to Boston a bunch and run down there because
Mhm.
there's so many tracks that are down there.
Right.
Ran at BU's old board track before
Yeah.
they built their new one. Bowdoin, I'm trying to think, Tufts. There's a bunch
Hmm.
of schools that are up there in
Hmm.
New England that had the indoor facilities. So it was really nice, and I've seen pictures. I've not been back to Maine to see the new facility
Yeah.
that they built. That is a Taj Mahal, from what I
Yes.
understand. But
Yeah. Because Colby's what, the Panthers? What's their,
mules.
is that right?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
have this vision of this huge like cat, this panther or something on the wall. Hmm.
Mm, no,
I gotta go back and look at
trying.
that now. Yeah, my memory.
Yeah,
Again,
no.
memory not that great because that was quite a while ago.
Well, you
Uh,
deal with so many coaches in so many different
yeah,
schools.
it's true. It's true. Humble brag there. Thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate that. Okay, so 3.5 years at Colby. Where and why did we go
uh,
somewhere else?
so I started having people kind of get in my ear a little bit, like, "Do you want to make this your career? Um, Maybe you should start looking at being a head coach."
Okay,
So,
you're
so I'm
all
like,
of
"Yeah,
4.5 years in the profession. Sure.
right? So a job came open back here in Ohio at Muskingum College,
Hmm.
mid-year. The athletic director that was there had been a football coach at Heidelberg, so there was a bit of a connection. Change of coach, so he called, asked if I was going to be back in Ohio for the holidays, and they had an opening because I had applied for it before, and they went another direction when it was open before. I didn't have enough experience under my belt, so had a chance to come back. Ended up getting offered the head coaching job at Muskingum College, head cross country and track. I think I was there for 4.5, 5 years. Um, Built the program, tried to bring in more kids. Kind of, first head coaching job
Mhm.
is always overwhelming a little bit because as an assistant, you deal with some of the behind the scenes stuff. not as much as the head coaches do. But we had a opportunity to, have some really good kids that have come through the program, set some school records, had some All-Americans, had some kids that made it to nationals. And it was a fun place to be back in the conference that I competed in back in high school or when I was in college. So knew some of the same coaches that were here. When I was an athlete, we're still coaching in the conference at that point. So I'm about 8 years out of college when I take over as a head coach. Was here this is when kind of the indoor tracks started getting built in Ohio.
Okay.
There started to be a lot more of them. And I don't think at that time we were in a position to build one at Muskingum. And I think there was a ceiling on what we could do from a recruiting standpoint and from a competition standpoint. Happened to be out at nationals and Trine University up in Indiana. I knew one of the coaches that was there that was leaving, and they were building an indoor facility. So Muskingum got me to be a head coach for the first time. Moved on to Trine. I was there for about 5 years. They were building an indoor facility, and I knew kind of, okay, the next step, each one of the moves in my career has been to try to take that next step and further things a little bit, do something I hadn't had an opportunity to do before. And when I was at Trine, we had, once the indoor facility was built, I think 13 indoor meets a year between college and high school.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. The president wanted us to make sure that the facility got used. And we got our use out of it between college and high school meets. We even hosted another conference's college meet. And, so because again, there weren't a whole lot of indoor tracks up in that Indiana, Michigan area. I think Calvin had just built one. Grand Valley had theirs. Hillsdale had their old one at that time, who's now built another one. So, we didn't have a whole lot of opportunities up in that area, the state or in the country or the region, I guess. So it was nice. We had a lot of home meets and helped our budget immensely, and it helped with recruiting too. So
is Trine Division III as well?
They are. Yep.
And is Trine, which is the school in that area that closed down? It wasn't Trine.
So they used to be called Tri-State University, and then I think it was 2008. They went through a name change and a rebrand, and that's where Trine came up.
Got it. So go back to Muskingum real quick. First of all, one of the cooler mascots. I do remember this one. It's some kind of shark, but it has teeth.
It's a muskie.
That's a muskie.
Okay. Fighting muskies. Yep.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's a cool. I can just see the animation of it. Yeah, it's really cool. My favorite question to ask new head coach, the first time you become a head coach, one is, first of all, were you ready to be the head coach?
Oh no.
Okay,
Not
good. That's how. See, that's kind of like my preliminary question, because if someone ever says yes, I'm always like, okay, we're a little delusional here. You're right. You're never ready until you actually sit down in it. Now, the real questions. What was something? Because there's people listening right now that are going to be head coaches one day. What is something that you thought was going to be really hard that ended up being easier than you thought? Whether it's scheduling, ordering equipment, recruiting, hiring people. What was something that you're like, oh man, okay, my first head coaching job, I know X is going to be really tough. And then you got in, you're like, oh, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Well, so God, that's a great question, but I think I'm probably going to go in the opposite direction with what you think I might say. Okay. The thought that I thought was going to be really, really difficult, but ended up being a little bit easier, was building a team with the culture that we had in mind.
Okay. So you went in knowing how hard culture is. So like, okay, this is going to be hard. And it actually ended up being a little bit less hard than you thought.
I think so. And a lot of that was because we had a lot of kids that really cared about what they did. Kind of almost had a little bit of that chip on their shoulder of maybe we know we don't have everything that everybody else has, but we're going to work at it. But I think, purchasing equipment's always a pain everywhere. Business offices, purchase orders, everybody does things
internally, not externally. Okay, good.
Good. Gill has great stuff.
Okay. All right. We're going to cut this short real fast and be done with this podcast.
No. But I mean, no matter where you're working, like the business office is always going to be what it is, how
Right.
you deal with it. Budgeting is always going to be what you deal with, none of the Division 3 programs, I think, are going to be the first to say, "Ooh, we have enough funding, we don't have to worry about that." So I think all of those things are going to be pretty similar across the board, a lot of places where I didn't even consider any of that when I took over my first head coaching job. I'm like, in my mind, it was, this is the way I want the team to function,
Mm.
and trying to get that established kind of right away um, gave me a better idea of what we were working with
Mm.
as a coach. And as a kid, they understood, this new guy that's coming in January,
Mm.
okay, this is what the expectation is going to be. And that was way back before we could do all the Zoom calls and everything that we've
Mm.
been doing lately. It
Right.
was, they literally showed up for practice the first day, and that's the first time they met me
Oh, wow.
in January when they came back from semester break. So we had a chance to sit down and say, okay, this is our, what we want to work on. These are the things that we expect. Here's how we want to run the program. I'm going to do everything I can to help you guys get better. We're going to probably do some things a little bit different, but what we're going to do is we're going to try to put you guys in a position to be the best that you can be, but you have to work hard at it. I can't be the only one to work hard at it.
I like that answer a lot, Bill, because that way of you building that culture on day one, by the way, it's hard no matter what day one
Mm-hmm.
is. Coming
Mm-hmm.
back from Christmas break, they've had a semester with one staff, and then all of a sudden it's like,
Yep. Yep.
here's
Yep.
a new guy. What in the world? And by the way, you got probably a competition the very next weekend or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that was, I'm going to keep saying less hard, not easy, because it's not easy. It was less hard than you thought it was going to be, because that culture that you brought, that you are bringing to Muskingum at that time, is built on the shoulders of the men and women who coached you beforehand. There was a little bit of Colby sprinkled in how you were
Mm-hmm.
going to run your program. There was a little
Yeah.
bit of
Yeah.
Hartwig spilled in there. There's a little bit of Muskingum from when you were an undergrad. There was a little bit of your high school coaching staff,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a teacher or other mentors along the way, your parents. All of that is built into how you are going to run your culture.
Mm-hmm.
So for that to be your answer, I absolutely love that, because it's really expressing what a lot of other people have poured into you up to that
Mm-hmm.
point. So now I'm going to ask the reverse of that question. What did you, as you become your new head coach in January, by the way, that's extremely tough. You're a new head coach. What was something that you thought was going to be extremely easy that ended up being a little bit harder than you thought?
Recruiting.
Oh, okay.
I think recruiting was, because we had, recruiting at Colby is a different animal, because there's a certain subset of student athletes in high school that have qualified for like the NESCAC type schools, the Williams Amherst middleweight. So you have a very small
Mm.
like pipeline, I guess, or focus on the kids that you work for, you look for.
Mm-hmm.
Muskingum is the same as Heidelberg and similar to Hartwick, is there's not really necessarily that, like, they have to hit this GPA that's a high GPA with this income, this earnings, and everything else. I think for us, like, the recruiting is, when the hardest part was finding the kid that was the right fit,
Mm.
and we had some kids along the way. There was a girl that we had recruited that was a really, really good distance runner. She ended up coming in as a freshman, was our top girl as a freshman, but ended up transferring after the first semester because, from a culture standpoint, it wasn't a great fit for her.
Mm.
The school and kind of where the program was at that point, she was looking for something a little bit different than what we had to offer. So I think we had some swings and we had some misses along the way with finding the right kid that was really the right fit for the school.
Mm.
As a young coach, you're like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a great coach. We're going to have a great team. I'm going to be able to sell you on that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that, there's 100 other coaches that are great coaches with great teams that are also trying to sell you on that too.
Right.
So I think that was probably the hardest transition as a head
Yeah.
coach, being able to find and identify those kids, because we didn't have much of a staff. I think I was the only full-time staff. We had two part-time coaches that came in and helped us out a little bit. And then I think my last year there, we finally got a grad assistant. So I'm kind of recruiting everybody all at the same time. And,
Mhm.
trying to make everything work in a way that we could continue to grow the program and continue to be competitive and increase how competitive we were able to be. But being able to identify that kid was really, really hard, I think, earlier in my career.
Yeah, I think that's
Not that
fat.
it's any easier now.
Right. Yeah. Well, it probably is because you've learned that. I was known when I coached as a recruiter. And so, Ball State, Mississippi State, the JUCO, et cetera.
Hmm.
Always got really, really like, some of the nation's top kids, all that kind of stuff. And I probably couldn't have verbalized it then, but I instinctually I understood the type of kid with a lot of dynamic, not just athletically, but and obviously academically, but like you mentioned about their household income, things like that.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
instinctively knew, and this is going to sound pretty you're going to laugh at this one, that it was going to be different from coaching boys and girls, men and women, junior
Hmm.
college in Kansas to only women at Ball State University and Mac.
Hmm.
I mean, it was instinctual. That's pretty easy instinctual, right? But when I got to Mississippi State, and it took me, luckily, it only took me like a half a second, but I had to realize like, oh, it's different here too.
Hmm.
I went there thinking, oh, I'm at Mississippi State now. I'm in the SEC. Everybody's going to know me, like, because they all see my team play on Saturday for football, so they're going to
Hmm.
know the track
Hmm.
team.
Yep.
And I remember the first time, if if you're a regular listener, you've heard the story 100 times. And the only reason I tell this story is because I signed the kid at the end. If I would have signed this kid, I'd never tell the story. But I remember the first kid I recruited, the very first kid I recruited, I swung for the fence. I'm going grand slam from the get-go. I'm recruiting LZ Coleman from up in New York. And LZ ended up setting the indoor high school 400-meter national records. That's how, he's a one
Hmm.
percenter,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm getting to know LZ. And I remember one phone call was like, oh, so, LZ, who are your, you said you're going to come visit us. That's awesome. Who are your other four? And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to Florida, USC, Baylor, and Texas. And I remember thinking, oh, crap. And this was the half a second, like, oh, it is different here. This is not easier.
Yeah.
In fact, it
Yeah.
might have gotten harder. I was like, oh, wait, I got to go beat Mouse. Mouse was a mentor of mine. Like, I got to go beat him. I got to beat I live in Starkville, in Mississippi, brother. He's going to go to LA and visit USC. That's going to be okay. That's going to be tough. Oh, wait, he's
Yep.
going to
Yep.
400-meter U. He's going to go to
Yep.
Baylor.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't really have that history either. Oh, and he's going to Texas, which, I'm just like, oh, and luckily it learned real quick, like, okay, these are the type of, the pool of kids that I can recruit at Mississippi State
Hmm.
are much smaller than say at like Ball State University. But it's going to have to be different. And we got to pick the right
Hmm.
person who wants to come to Starkville, Mississippi,
Right.
over other places. So I think it's fascinating when people are good recruiters. I'm always like, oh, I'd like to see you at different, not just all Power Five or even all
Hmm.
D3 or all D2, like mix up the locations and types of
Yeah.
academically and non-academically the schools too. I think it's extremely tough. So I think a guy like you obviously has personality. You kind of were a little bit like me. It seems like oh, well, I got a great school and it's me, and and you should believe in yourself. That's not a bad thing. Like, oh, and it's me, like I'll be able to do this. And you forget, like, oh, wait, coach over there, well, he's a good dude too.
Hmm.
And this coach over here,
Yep.
man, she's
Yep.
awesome and smart. Oh my gosh, we're all battling for these kids.
Yep.
Holy cow, by the way. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you went to, thanks for that. So you went to Trine. Are we at the point, did you go Trine to Heidelberg now?
No, there were a couple of stops in there between Trine and Heidelberg.
Okay, let's
So,
let's keep going because I have a question that is burning in my soul to ask, but I want to keep going
okay.
here. So Muskingum head coach, you go to Trine. How was that? Did they do the indoor facility while you were there?
First year is when they finished it. So
So that's a
I
unique
was there.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it was getting a chance to work with the layout,
Yeah.
and then actually like hosting the champion or hosting all the meets
Hmm.
indoor in Indiana in high school was kind of on the rise at that point.
Hmm.
So we started hosting quite a few indoor high school meets, and then with the Indiana high school state championships kind of being a thing for high school.
Hmm.
They've got the qualifying meets, so we actually were able to host a couple of those, and we had a ton of kids that were on campus and in the building. But I think being able to host that home indoor conference championship
That's cool.
back in the day, because before the MIAA is the conference that Trine was in. So we're in there with Adrian and Calvin and Hope
Oh
and
yeah.
Olivet and all those schools. We were the only school not in Michigan in the Michigan Intercollegiate Conference. Uh, but back
Makes
then,
sense.
we didn't have indoor track as a conference championships because there were no indoor tracks. We built
Oh,
one and Calvin built one at about the same time. So we alternated with a conference indoor championship however it was that we named it back then, it was kind of proof of concept to
Hmm.
the presidents and to the chancellors that, there's an interest in this. All of the teams are participating in this. So we did it at
Right.
Calvin, we did it at our place. I think we went back and forth 3 or 4 years before the conference got on board and said, okay, we're going to sponsor this as an indoor championship. So
Hmm.
to
That's
be
cool.
part of laying that groundwork was really cool, and to see the conference all come together and come on board, because there were a couple of coaches that were against indoor track, because
Can I get some names, please? I need to talk to those guys and gals.
um, but I think the more that they got involved with it, and the more they saw that it helped their student athletes, it helped with retention, it helped
Right.
with all of the other schools that were chiming in people's ears, like, hey, we've got an indoor facility. Why don't you
Right.
come over here? We have a championship.
Hmm.
Um, so that was really, really fun to kind of be part of that.
That's cool.
And then kind of the next step in the career was
Yeah.
I went to Virginia. I was at Randolph College, used to be Randolph Macon Women's College, and I ended up taking that step. I'd been down to Lynchburg, Virginia before, so it's right across town from Lynchburg College with
Hmm.
Liberty University.
Hmm.
Really is kind of a college town, surprisingly.
Very much so.
Um,
Yeah.
but they only had cross country at the time.
Hmm.
And the cross country coach was the physics professor that started the cross country program. They wanted to add track and field.
Okay.
So I took the head coaching job down there, to start a program from scratch, which is something that not many people ever get a chance to do. So that was the thing that really intrigued me about that position. Another small Division III school, knew the area somewhat, knew the conference somewhat. Roanoke, Washington and Lee,
Mm.
those schools all in the conference. So it was an opportunity to go and really start something from scratch, which at that point was something that I thought was really appealing. Like, okay, I get to come down, we get to start everything from scratch, rebuild kind of cross country from the get go, but really put our stamp on starting the track program indoors and outdoors. They had a gorgeous outdoor facility, stadium that had already been built because they redid their soccer field because they didn't have football.
Mhm.
They only had soccer, was kind of soccer and lacrosse were the main outdoor sports that they had at the time, but redid this gorgeous stadium with this great 8-lane track, binding track they had put down. So it was a really unique kind of a setting too. I'm like, oh yeah, they've got great facilities. It's in the South. I don't need an indoor track. Little did I know it still snows,
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
and gets cold. But I think the opportunity to do something like that was, like I said, so unique
Yeah.
that we got a chance to really work from the ground up with that. And I think that's really the reason that I ended up taking that position, to start something from nothing.
You're really layering an interesting career. I mean, Bill, I know you think you've coached for a long time, but you still have, at least 2 decades in here, buddy. So it's not like you're near the tail end of your career here. And at this point, you've already been a head coach. There's,
Mhm.
if you play like track coach bingo, being a head coach, okay, that would be in there somewhere. Doing a facility, that's something that,
Yep. Yep.
not many coaches do at all in their careers.
Right.
Some will do one time in their career. Very few do more than one in their career. You're already starting to check that off with trying and hosting conference meets.
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
another part of the bingo card here. Kind of starting a program from scratch.
Hmm.
That's a different skill set than taking over 30, 40
Yeah.
already in the roster type programs. It's really interesting what you're building up in this early stage of the career here.
Yeah.
Did,
Yeah.
did, did you purposely search out challenges? Like, could you ever search out like make it a little easier on yourself here, Bill? But like at this point, it seems like you're like, oh, that's going to be a tough situation. Yeah, yeah. You got a job open. I want to come over there. Oh, you got a tough
Yeah.
situation. All right, cool, cool. I want to come over there. It seems like you're like pursuing these challenges.
I don't think purposely that was my intent.
Hmm.
I think for me it was more, what haven't I done
Hmm.
along the way that everybody doesn't get a chance to experience. I
Hmm.
mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I knew at Muskingum we weren't going to get an indoor facility. Ironically, they just opened one, I think last year, the year
Yeah, which is
before,
that last year. Yeah.
um, that we're going to get a chance to go and compete at this spring. But back then it wasn't in the cards.
Hmm.
So okay, there's an indoor facility, gives me an opportunity to compete at a different level at Trine. And then I was there. And then when the opening came up down at Randolph, I'm like, you know what? This is unique. Like it's a unique opportunity. Not very
Yeah.
many people ever get a chance to start a program. And it was a challenge for sure, but it was something that I really enjoyed. Getting a chance to just build something and almost go back to that, this is what we want it to be type of a mentality, starting off from a cultural standpoint. I mean, really kind of laying that foundation clearly at the beginning, since it wasn't there before. Cross country had existed, so there was a bit of a shift and a transition there that needed to be done. But track was, they had, one of the guys that was on the cross country team had kind of started a track club
Hmm.
so that they could do some stuff in the springs. But I was the first full-time track and cross country coach in the school's history. And we had a little bit of success while we were down there, but it was fun along the way too.
I just wrote myself a note. I'm going to put together a coach's bingo card of head coach, assistant coach, volunteer. That's going to be on there. Start a new program, build a facility. Yeah, I'm going to put that together. That'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so after Randolph, you probably went and found a program that had dropped men's track, and you were going to bring it. I don't know, some challenge. What was next after Randolph?
So while I was at Randolph, so when I was all the way back to Hartwick, Joe Dombrowski was the head track and cross country coach when I was his assistant.
Right.
His wife is a field hockey and women's lacrosse coach. So I'm just kind of laying a little groundwork. They both work at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee.
Mhm.
Joe is an equipment manager now. He's no longer coaching. Michelle is the head women's lacrosse coach, field hockey coach. They put on a cross country camp over the summers. And when they knew I was in Virginia, Joe, Michelle, they called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come over and work our cross country camp? We know you're in the area, 7.5, 8 hours away." I'm like, "Sure, why not? That sounds like fun." So 3 summers, I went over to Sewanee, would work the cross country camp, gorgeous campus, 60 plus miles of trails on campus, 13,000 acre school. I mean,
Wow.
and they're Division 3. But it was kind of a Colby type of a school, really high achieving student
Mhm.
athletes, kind of that select type of kid again. But I did that for 3 summers, and I used to joke with the head coach that was there for track and cross country, Jeff Heitzenrader. I'm like, "Jeff, you need to just retire, or they need to give you another position, and I'll come over and I'll work at Sewanee." So fast forward to an announcement that Jeff was retiring from coaching and moving back to admissions after 21 years as the coach there. And so I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." So I called up Michelle and Joe. I'm like, "Hey, what's the chance?" Because I love the school, I love the areas in the mountains, I love the outdoors. Um, was there, ended up being there for 4 years as the head track and cross country coach. So what I joked about during the summers ended up coming to fruition.
Wow.
But my first year there was 18, 19. 19 is when COVID started.
Mhm.
So we had a cross country season that went really well. We had an indoor season that went pretty well. And then the world shut down,
Mhm.
that spring. So, and then we were even more strict the following year in 2021. So 20, that fall, there was still no competitions anywhere. 21 spring, some people were competing, some people
Yeah.
weren't. Our vice chancellor made the decision that we could compete, but we could only do it on campus. So the rest of the SAA, the conference we were in, ended up having an outdoor championships that year. We couldn't go and compete. We had 2 tri meets at home. That was it for track. So, it was a difficult first 2 years on the job while we were there. But then once we got through that, things kind of settled back to normal. We started really trying to focus on recruiting, building a team. And in my last year there, we had a couple of family things that happened, and then the job came open up here at Heidelberg that it had been open in the past, but it never felt like it was the right time to look at it. Brian was the head coach for everything, cross country and track. It used to be a separate position. They combined it under him. And then we hired a new athletic director at the beginning of last year here at Heidelberg, and Greg wanted to invest into the program. And he thought the best way to grow the program was splitting that position into 2 separate head coaches. So now we have a head cross country coach. I'm the head track coach. We've got 4 grad assistants technically that work with the program. So we've got 6 coaches for the track and cross country program here. Never in my coaching career have I had a staff with that many coaches.
Right.
Usually they've been 1.5, 2.5 people. So everything just kind of fell in place that it was the right time that the job came open. It had to come open in November. I had talked to Brian, who was the cross country coach, who is the cross country coach. Didn't feel like it was the right fit then, but I kept it in the back. It kept popping up in the back of my mind. So February rolled around. They still hadn't filled it. I talked to Brian again,
Wow.
and then I just reached out to the athletic director. Like, hey, you don't know who I am. What are you looking for? Was really kind of the crux of the email that I had sent him. And so he kind of, well, let's set up a phone call. So we talked. He told me everything that they were going to do with the program, with the new Fieldhouse that they're going to break ground on, with the coaches, with kind of the direction he wants to see the program go. And then he said, you know what, if you're interested, let me know, and I'll put the search committee together. We'll set up a Zoom and we'll go from there and see what happens. So kind of fast forward end of February, beginning of March. Came out and interviewed, and they offered me the job. So I was still down in Tennessee at the time. I couldn't leave them because had I left, the team wouldn't have had a coach. So Greg and I kind of talked. I said, I need to finish the year out down here. It's not fair to my kids on the team right now for me to leave in the middle of the season and for them to not have a season. And Joe was my assistant coach at the time, Dombrowski. So it kind of came full circle. He was my head coach. I convinced him my last year there to come and help me out, and he was helping out with my throwers. So it was really we joked about it all the time because I literally lived 2 houses down from them. We had built a house in Tennessee too. So it was really kind of funny to see how that kind of came full circle in that regards. But then I came up here and I hit the ground running in May, and feel like I'm just now getting a chance to breathe.
Yeah, right. And then I come calling and you're like, oh man. Okay. So here's the question that's been burning in me. Help us understand. So we're very intentional of, this is not the Gill Division I Connections podcast. And most of my experience coaching is in Division I. I had, some high school and 1 year of junior college, but Ball State, Mississippi State, etc. So we've had several Division III coaches on here, D2, NAI, etc. Were you your whole career, all the way back to your athletics, has been in the Division III realm, which is a really special realm. Like, it's a unique realm. And I mean that not special like, you're special, Bill, like special, like it's a cool division here. Were you always pursuing D3 positions, or did it just end up like that? And if you were pursuing them, why?
I don't think over the course of my career, I don't think I've ever applied for a job that wasn't a Division III job. Maybe there was an NAIA job somewhere along the way that I had applied for. But for me, Division III means you do it because you're passionate. You love what you do. You're doing it because you want to, not because there's an ulterior motive that is connected to it. Let's face it, Division I, there's not a lot of prestige in Division I track and field, or any track and field in general, unless you're that top 1%. I have always loved what Division III brings to the table, and it also doesn't limit the opportunities specifically for our sport. As a Division III track and field athlete, personally, I had a chance to compete at Eastern Michigan. I competed at Kent State. I competed at Division I schools as a Division III athlete. Over the years, I've taken kids that are Division III kids to Penn relays. We've been to Coastal Carolina. We've been to UAB. We've been to a lot of Division I competitions over the years as Division III athletes. So for me, that doesn't matter what level you compete at, because kind of back to your point, 100 meters is 100 meters. Regardless, at the end of the day, whether you have a scholarship or not, doesn't make my experience or your experience any less valuable or any more valuable. Kind of the story that I tell everybody is I was not meant to be a sprinter.
That's true.
I was a distance runner. I had somebody that believed in me and allowed me to become what I became when I was racing in college. No Division I school would have ever given me a chance to do that had I ever thought about doing and
Mm,
reaching out to one. Um, I was an All-American. I will never have that taken away from me. It does not mean any less to me than it does to a Division I runner, a Division II runner, an NAIA runner. I was able to be involved in whatever it was that I wanted to when I was in college. And I kind of work the same way with my student athletes is I'm not going to limit you to only being a track athlete
mm,
while you're here at Heidelberg. We've got soccer, we've got volleyball, we've got football players that are all a member of our track team. We've got basketball players that are coming out for the outdoor track season. So you can be involved in a multitude of things, and it's not us versus them,
mhm,
if that makes sense.
mhm,
It's you can be the best version of what you want to be while you're here without being told what version that has to be.
mm,
And if you want to be involved in multiple things, then you're more than welcome to. Now, we have the conversation a lot of times where kids are so involved in so many things. My joke is you become a Swiss Army knife. You do a lot of things, but you don't do anything very well. We want you to be excellent in everything that you're involved in, whether it's academics, whether it's community service, whether it's athletics, but that's on your terms, not necessarily on my dictating those terms, if that makes sense. But I think for Division I, there's so many things about the sport and about sports in general at this level that are just the sport. It's not NIL. It's not comparing scholarships. It's not that's the ulterior motive. I'm just going there because they're paying me to play. So it's
mm,
my job.
mm.
These kids are on the team for no other reason other than they want to be part of the team and it's something that's important to them. And at the end of the day, they make that decision. I don't necessarily say, the best kids get to be on the team because we talk a lot about culture along the way and we talk about fit along the way with what we do. And you either want to be part of it or you don't, I think. But if you want to boil it down to something really simple, it's there's a unique feel to Division III that's not limited in what we do with our sport specifically.
I've said this for many, many years, even before I got to Gill when I was still coaching. I said, maybe some of the best coaches that we have out there are actually on the Division III level. Go look at who's being recruited, the marks that are being recruited to Division III, and then go look at the Division III
Mm-hmm.
national championship. And that certainly has borne out here in the last year or two because you guys have just gone nuts. I think it took 10:09, 10:03 to win your 100 in the
Mm-hmm.
men's. I think
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
200 was a separate person, by the way. This isn't just one sprinter that was
Yeah.
running the
Oh yeah.
102. Two different people.
Yep.
200-meter was run in like 20 point
Yeah.
something. I
Yeah.
mean, it's ridiculous. And of course, people like Andrew Rock has come out of D3. What's the half miler?
Andrew
Willamette.
Rock, Nick
Simmons.
Simmons.
There you go. Yeah.
Um,
There's a hurdler I'm missing too that was a stud, I believe, but and some great pole vaulter. But it's not. I mean, Division III is amazing
mhm.
athletically. And then when you start talking about I love how you put that. I kind of wrote, I got to go back and check exactly how you said. I want to use this as one of our quotes so that people can see this when we publish this. You said, I'm probably paraphrasing here. I want to go back and hear your exact quote. You can be in Division III you're talking about, you can be the best person that you can be. You probably said want to be without being told to be that person. And again, I probably butchered it, but I could see what
Mhm.
you're saying there of like, you can come here and if you want to be an awesome volleyball player and track athlete, this is the place you can be.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, that's probably not going to happen. I'm going to leave names out of it, out of a Division I university.
Right. Right.
And I don't want to necessarily say for understandable reasons. I read this tweet the other day. I live my life on Twitter, Bill. So that's all I hear is what's on Twitter. If it's not on Twitter, it doesn't exist to me for some reason. But it was kind of a controversial take. I wish I could give credit due to who it was that tweeted it. I'll have to go find it again. But this person said, and I'm not even sure this was a track person. This might have been a retweet from a track person, another sport person, but they said, I don't think coaches should be fired because of their record. Yeah, it wasn't a track person because they were talking about football and basketball as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a track person retweeted it and had, conversation about it. And, that's a pretty controversial take, especially in
Mm-hmm.
America on
Yeah.
sports, right?
Yeah.
And, maybe we tend to think of pro sports and it's like, wait a minute, if the Raiders coach ain't producing, you think he shouldn't be fired, et cetera. Let's take it down to the college and high school level though. And let's take it to the track side specifically, because it really resonated with me. 99.9999 track athletes that we ever coach are going to make money in this sport. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. They're not.
Right.
They're not. Unfortunately, it's so hard in our sport that 99.99% are not going to do it. So, what in the world does it matter if you win or not? But because I know right now, someone's tweeting me right now. I can feel it. Stop it. Just wait. Listen to the rest of this. 100% of the kids that you coach, Bill, the 100% of the kids that Pat Henry at A&M and Mouse Holloway at Florida are going to coach, are going to go on to become moms and dads and business owners and clergy and restaurant manager, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
That is the real impact that you as a track coach makes, is what these kids go on to become adults in society. So, Bill, if you never, ever win a conference title, but you produce kids that believe in themselves, that have love for themselves and loves for others and hard work ethic and go on to do great things in society, I'm not sure. And I think you're a pretty good coach because in fact, you went through the same coaching education I did. I mean, down to the class. So you are obviously a genius, because I was a genius track coach. But there are so many other parameters around you coaching that you have zero control out of, whether they become good or not in their events. They go to college for the first time. There's all these different stressors and pressures. They may just not love track, and so they love English class instead, and all these other things that go on that you have zero control out of, and you should be punished because your 4x4 team didn't run 3:25.
We talk about that. It's kind of funny you bring that up. The other 22 hours of the day,
Mm,
all the time at practice.
mm,
And, we talk about, I pulled an all-nighter. Okay, you don't get to practice today. You get to go home and take a nap. It's midterms week. So whatever, I could have the world's best training plan planned out, but if you come to me and you've got the flu, it's midterms week. Your dog ran away, whatever it is that's going on, we have to be able to make those adjustments to what we want to do from a training standpoint. And I tell the kids, all the kids that we recruit, if there's two skills that you build while you're in high school before you come into my program, the two most important things for me are you learn how to communicate,
mm,
not just LOLs and emojis, um, and you learn how to manage your time.
mm.
Because those are two skills that are going to carry you through life in any realm that you're involved in.
So
And,
true.
if I don't know what's going on outside of practice, I'm not just here to make you better for practice, because I can't do that if I don't know the other things that are going on. Right.
Right.
So we really want to try to communicate with our kids, and we want to work with our kids. And so many kids come to us out of high school with PTSD, because in high school, you can only compete a lot of times two people in whatever events for your high school for a lot of the invitationals. So kids are scared to talk to their coaches and tell them that there's an injury, or
Mm,
that they're dealing with all these other personal things that are going
wow.
on. So we have to kind of educate them a lot of times, and maybe we go about it a little bit different than some other folks. But we really try to put forward that injuries are not necessarily a bad thing. It's when we don't know about the injury that it becomes an issue.
Right.
We can't make adjustments. I can make changes to training so that you can still continue to train and improve in a different way than what everybody else is doing. And I'm not going to hold it against you.
Right.
One of the things that we tell our kids all the time is we're not results oriented with the way we run our program. We are process driven.
Mm,
So for me, like Monday through Friday is so much more important than what you do on Saturday.
yeah.
And the only Saturday that matters to us, which ironically our conference meet isn't a Friday, Saturday, it's a Thursday, Friday for outdoors. Um,
Of
but at
course.
the end of, right,
That
but at
really
the end
messes up
of,
with the message here.
right, we need to get on board. But for me, like everything is just a trial run to get to
Yeah.
that conference meet. We
Yeah.
do this big talk with the team at the end of the season. we've had 100 and whatever many practices to get to this point. Just take a minute, think about the one or two things that we've focused on that you've made huge improvements in along the way. And with, especially in today's climate where mental health is such a thing, so many of these kids are brought up. Even I see it in track nowadays. Like, I have to win or it's a failure.
Yep.
I have to, and not even that. It's not even I had to win or it's a failure. I have to PR every single time I come out to an event or it's a
Mm-hmm.
failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of joke. We had a kid last year that went 10-6 in the 100 as a freshman. This year, I bring him up in practice all the time. I'm like, okay, if Jake runs an 11-7 at the conference meet but wins, is that a failure?
Yeah, right.
They're like,
Yeah.
but it's not my PR. I don't care, but you won. Is that a failure? Is
So,
that a
so,
win?
so
Like,
so the inverse, if you run 1050 but get 20th, is that a
right,
success?
right.
Yeah.
So I
And,
think,
and we're our own worst enemies in this sport, by the way. Because to your point, when we're so rabid about world records, so on the elite level, if they don't set a world record, it's like, well, that wasn't very
yeah,
good.
yeah,
Same with
yep,
college, like, oh,
yeah,
especially nowadays with with what you coaches are doing out there, national records are falling like they're drinking water here. It's crazy. So now if
yep,
it's like, oh, they didn't PR, they didn't set a national record, it's like, not the greatest of days. I was like,
yeah,
I tend to think we forget, and especially in track and field, when you go to a football game, there's one winner. A
right.
team wins, right? The other quarterback doesn't win because he threw more yards. Like there's no winner for that. It's just a team score, right? But in
Hmm.
track and field, depending on the meet, and hopefully most meets, you do have a team winner, which we need to do more, in my opinion, for track, but whatever. But we have, what is there, 21, 22 events? We have 21, 22 event winners. So I
Yeah.
think we tend to forget because we have so many winners. So, double sex, right? Male and female. It means we have 22, or I'm sorry,
Hmm.
44
Hmm.
winners every meet that we go to. I think we forget that winning is hard
Yeah,
because we have so
yeah,
many events, the way we do things. I think we forget it's hard. And so when our kid goes out and wins and doesn't set a PR, we're just so numb to winning. It's like, oh, well, there are 40 other kids that won today. So that's no big deal. You
right.
didn't PR, so it wasn't successful. I think that's wrong. I think you're on the right track here, Bill. I love your. Tell me more about this, because I've heard this, and I read a lot of business books and things like that. Uh, Process over results. Where did that come from, though? Because that's not. I'll have a lot of other people on this podcast, or I can go on Twitter right now and find out that you're wrong, that it's about the results and only the results. But I really believe in this and have heard this a lot. Where did process over results, where did that start for you? Is this a book? Is this a class? Is this a parent, a teacher? Where this had to start somewhere?
I think honestly, it came from on the job.
Mm.
Like, just seeing so many kids that get it right in practice, right? You're working on new skills, you're working on hurdles, you're working on your release, you're working on whatever it is, and it's right in practice, and they replicate it all the time in practice, and it looks like money. You're like, yes,
Mhm.
you're gonna go out, you're gonna PR, you're gonna win, you're gonna do whatever, and then they get to the meet, and they get in their own way.
Mm.
It's anxiety, it's stress, it's I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know that I can do this.
Mhm.
It's so results driven that if I
Mhm.
don't fill in the blank, it's a failure.
Mhm.
And a lot of that, I mean, you look at AAU, you look at, how many of these kids that are getting forced into these big competitions from such a young age that you're going to be the next left-handed middle
Oh.
reliever for the Braves or whatever. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be a loss. So I think somewhere along the way, there were athletes that I worked with that on any given day when they're having fun, were unbeatable. We're all
Mm.
Americans. But then I would see them get in their own way, and then it would compound the disappointment
Mhm.
because they know they're better than those people, but they never performed when it mattered to beat those
Mhm.
people. So it was, okay, what do we have to get away from? And what do we have to draw our focus to? And I've, read some different sports psychology books and going to different clinics, and almost I've went to a lot of the high school convention clinic mentality when it comes to a sports psychology, because that's where a lot of it comes from in developing, the perception of wins and losses, or,
Mhm.
being able to filter your focus into what matters and what's most important. And for me, you see kids that go to nationals for the first time, go to the state meet for the first time, and they're head and shoulders better than what their performance is. Well, what happened? Well, I was so nervous. I didn't eat that day. I was running against somebody that was so much faster than me. I knew I was never going to beat them. There was nothing that I could do. I was going to have to do something I'd never done before. So the focus left them and what they've done to get to that point, and it was more on everything else that everybody else was doing. So we really try to work on a lot of what are you kind of the stay in your lane. You've got 2 lanes on either side. What's going on outside of those lanes doesn't matter. Keep in your lane, focus on your lane, and focus on what you're doing, and you'll see your improvements if you're doing what you need to do along the way. But really, almost trying to keep it simple. And
Yeah.
I'm a little sarcastic, a lot of sarcastic. I'm a lot of a goofball, and sometimes that's the way we deal with the meets. I just go out and I try to have fun with them. I try to lighten the load, change the
Yeah.
focus and the expectation a little bit. I'm not coaching anything different than anybody else is coaching. I'm just trying to change the focus a little bit
Yeah.
away from the anxiety of I have to perform. Well, that's what it comes down to is why do you have to perform? So
You know, and I try to stay away from statements like kids these days and that kind of thing, because I don't think kids have changed really. Obviously technology has changed, but I think young people, 18 to 22-year-olds, whether they were in the 40s or the 2040s, are going to be the same way. I just what they have in front of them, whether it's video games and a cell phone or newspapers and a bicycle back in the day or something. I don't know. So I don't necessarily think that, but I do think because of technology, it's easier to bring in negativity and pressure and stress. I mean, we're told every day, and this isn't just kids. This is, again, I'm on Twitter 24/7. I'm being told every day that I'm not successful because I'm not a millionaire. I'm being told every day that I'm not successful because I don't weigh 180 pounds. I'm being told every day that I'm not successful because I don't look like Tom Cruise. And these kids are getting it from, they didn't know back in the day when we ran. We had no clue, maybe outside of our county, maybe in our state, maybe what other kids were running. So there was zero comparison out there. Now, my guy John Dye changed the game with DyeStat, and now with MileSplit and Athletic.net and TFers and things like that. I know what everybody's doing,
oh
and
yeah.
with social media, I know 1 second after they cross that finish line what they did. I know where I'm at in the conference every second of the day. I know where I
Yep.
am nationally. I know where I am amongst other divisions, etc. And so, the way you're describing it, so everybody is pressuring people, and especially our young people that we're talking about here specifically. It seems like you mentioned that your favorite part of every day, your happy place, I think is what you said, is at
Yep.
practice. It
Yep.
feels like you work really hard to make sure that the young people that are in your program, their best time of the day is also going to be on that track.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the big thing is there's so many things that are going on in life, whether it's, outside stress, academic stress, social stress, whatever it is that's going on. Like this is a happy space.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I said, leave it all at the door. Like when you come to practice, let's just try to focus on practice, focus on what we're trying to do. The rest of the stuff, it's still going to be there. But the more you worry about it, the less you're going to be able to get out of this.
Yeah.
So, let's take a little bit of time and just focus on this, have fun with what we're trying to do, work hard. Don't get me wrong. We're not
Right.
just,
Right.
here, playing games all the time, but we
Right.
want to enjoy what we're doing. And it's finding that happy medium of working hard, enjoying what we're doing, and also feeling like they're in a better spot when they get done with practice to
Yeah.
now go on and tackle, those earth shattering things that
Right.
18, 19, 20-year-olds think are the most important thing in the world
Yeah.
until they come back 5, 10 years later.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, remember that? That was goofy.
Yeah, but those are the most important things in the world. When
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
18, 19,
Yeah.
20-year-old,
Oh, yeah.
your
Yeah.
boyfriend breaks up with you, that is devastating
Yep.
at
Yep.
that moment. We look back now, we're like, oh, thank God I broke up with Susan Q because I married a much better woman than back, her. But that is important. So they're
Mhm.
grades because that's all we talk
Yeah.
about in society. You're in college, well, you better be a 4.0. And if you're not
Yeah.
4.0, you're not perfect. Well, what are you doing
Right.
here, kid?
Right.
We're
Right.
always, that is what's important to them. Uh, Bill, that's amazing. Thank you for that. We never, I don't know, peel back the curtain here a little bit, dear listener. None of our guests, including Bill here today, get like a preset of questions. They have no idea what's coming at them. I have no idea what's coming at them. So, we typically start with a structure of, hey, we're going to talk about with Bill here, how did he get in track, what positions he went to, things like that. But then my mind just goes and wanders, and I want to like bring and extract as much value as possible. And Bill, having that conversation about coaching, I know we wrapped that discussion around Division 3, but that's a really important discussion for our NAI coaches, for our Division 2, for our Division 1, for our high school. I'll separate pros a little bit because it is a paycheck at that, that is your job at that point. But that conversation is extremely important for our coaches to learn, because we can't have coaches doing this for a career for 10 years. We can't have it doing it for 20 years. This is going to be a career. What you do is extremely important for young people. So we need you in this game for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That's why I'm a huge proponent of pay more, pay more, pay more, because I want to keep you in this profession, because there's a lot of other professions that pay you a lot more. And I want you to go do those, to be honest with you, because I want you to take care of your family, friends, and passions and charities. So if that's what's right, get out of the game. You'll contribute to society in other places, but I need you to stay in this game, this coaching profession, for longer. And so I need you to get paid more to take care of yourself. So Bill, that was just a fascinating, just almost tangent that we went down there, man. I'm so grateful for that. We have a few minutes left here. Why don't you, to wrap us up here, tell us, you're kind of just now getting your foot settled here a little bit in Heidelberg, back in the old stomping grounds here as your alma mater. What's got you excited? What are you looking forward to here in 2024 and beyond? What's you're going to put your real fingerprint. You had your athlete fingerprint on the program. Now you're going to put your coach fingerprint on there. What's got you excited there at Heidelberg?
I mean, so I literally hit the ground running in May. Finished up some recruiting, got a chance to start some recruiting, but really trying to start working with the kids that were already in the program and laying the foundation of what direction they want to go with the program, in addition to where I want to go. So it kind of goes back to the collaboration of, it's their program. I'm just the one kind of steering the ship a certain direction as well. We've got some really, really good kids that have bought in really, really quickly this year, the upperclassmen, some fifth years that wanted to see what the team was going to be like with a full coaching staff. With having 6 coaches on staff, like I said, it's the most coaches I've ever had anywhere that I've been. So delegating to each of my assistants has been interesting. Not having my hands on everything has been new this year, so I've had to continue to learn. I was able to bring one of my former athletes from Randolph as my jumps coach here, so she followed me all the way to Ohio to be our jumps coach, which has been fun. But we've got a Division 2 guy from Findlay that's working with our sprinters with me. We've got a Division 3 throws coach from Bluffton that's over here helping, and his throws coach from college, who's no longer coaching at college, has come over and volunteered a little bit. So we've got an opportunity to build a program with all of the coaching staff into the direction that it used to be. It used to be one of the top programs in the conference. That's, like I said, that's going to be a result of the work that we put in, not the focus of the work that we're trying to put in. We've already started clearing ground for a brand new Fieldhouse. So that is 30 years too late, but at least it's still coming. So we're gonna have a new 200 meter. It's gonna be great for us from a training standpoint. It's going to open up opportunities for high school students in the area to be able to get training in, to be able to have another option for competition. And then from a shameless recruiting standpoint, having 500 kids on campus on a Saturday for a high school meet, they're going to walk around campus in between their events, and they're going to see what all we have to offer. So it's been really fun to be back, more so than I expected, I guess. Every time you take a new job, I'm going to be able to do this with my job. I'm going to be able to do whatever with my job. This one was career, family focused, and the level of comfort coming into it was something that I've never experienced anywhere else, because of the familiarity with the school, because of the familiarity with the town and the area. It just felt like I tell kids all the time, when you figure out what school you're going to go to, you're not going to know why.
Hmm.
It's just going to feel like it's the right choice. And honestly, in the short 6 months that I've been here, 7 months that I've been here officially, it's felt like the best choice I could have made
Hmm.
in my career, or I have made in my career. Each one, I mean, we've already listed through each career step that I've taken
Hmm.
has been to further my career for whatever the reason was at the time. This is an opportunity to continue my career.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to further it anywhere else. I'm just trying to focus on, what our career is, the direction that we want to go. We want to build a program. We want to grow the program. We want to be competitive. But at the crux of it, we still focus everything kind of around the culture. Kids that are really excited about continuing their athletic career, kids that are passionate about working hard and want to improve, and kids that are going to be good teammates. I mean, and that's really our starting point for from a recruiting standpoint, trying to get to know the kids and the families, and they get to know us. And
Hmm.
for some people, we're maybe not the right fit. They want something that's really hard line. We're
Hmm.
focused on winning. We're focused on competition. Don't get me wrong, I hate to lose.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think a lot of that takes care of itself along the way in making those improvements in a way that I don't want to say is better or worse than focused on the results,
Hmm.
but I think maybe healthier in a way that we're focused on the process and on the person
Hmm.
and helping them grow. Because what I want them to do is after they graduate, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, they come back to campus because I'm still here and they got their kids that they bring with them.
Right.
Or the first indoor track meet, we've got 100 alumni that come back because they're just super excited. So, when Larry, my coach, got inducted into the Hall of Fame this year, I went to the Hall of Fame ceremony and there were probably 20, 25 guys that all ran for Larry that came back for the ceremony. And afterwards, we were all just sitting in the office. They were looking at the record board and we're just reliving like our glory days, so to speak, talking about some of the stupid stuff that they did while they were in college, or one of the guys, his daughters didn't believe that he was really fast and his name was on the record board, so we brought him in to show her the record board. But just that's been probably the most fun part, is the things that I've missed out on for the past 25 years since I graduated.
Hmm.
I've made some of those connections back. I've got a chance to talk to old classmates that have been on campus, or I've got some friends. My roommate has one of my senior roommate, his son is a sophomore here. One of the guys I played soccer with, his son is a sophomore here. So being able to kind of make those connections, you don't realize how important they were
Yeah.
until you make them again.
Yeah.
So that has been really, really fun. And it's every day. It's been not a perfect day, but I love what I do, obviously, and I wouldn't have done it for this long because obviously it's not for the pay. Now we'll have to get you in touch with my athletic director for that. We
That's
need to
right.
get paid more.
That's right. That's right.
But I truly think like it was the right time and it was the right place to be able to come back to my alma mater and build a program into something that I think everybody that's part of is going to be proud of in whatever they're trying to accomplish.
We believe here at Gill that healthy things grow. And, Bill, through your story, through your journey, I heard a lot of growth through, your initial head coaching job, the different positions you took. I see now with Heidelberg growing with a new facility, the team growing, your staff growing. I mean, see that kind of support from administration is important. If you're not growing, you're going backwards. Stagnation is going
Right.
backwards in
Right.
today's world. So it's just so cool to see that and to see you've told your journey and you told some really fun stories from your past, but your face lit up a little bit around now about what's going on at Heidelberg now. And when you were talking about, some of your former classmates, kids being on the
Hmm.
other
Hmm.
teams and talking about the facility and recruiting, your face just lit up a little
Yeah.
differently. You're a forward looking you're not a looking in the past kind of
Yeah.
guy. You're a forward looking guy. And I can tell you're really looking forward to 2024, 25, 26, 27
Yeah.
in the future after that. So that's really cool. It's going to be a blast to be able to kind of watch from the sidelines and see the team team grow under your leadership and the coaching staff's leadership there, because it's there's kind of no doubt it's going to happen. I mean, you've got a really great process over results philosophy that I think ends up being more results positive than people give it credit for.
Awesome. Yeah, it has been. It's been kind of refreshing, I guess, so to
Yeah,
speak, at this point, being able to come back and be part of what we're trying to do, and just being back home. It
that's
feels
cool.
like home more than anything.
Well, you deserve it, my friend. So I love hearing that. That's so, so awesome. Bill, thank you so much.
Mhm.
The most expensive, highest quality thing you could ever give me is your time. And, I always tell people, my mantra is this is not an easy podcast to listen to. Our average is an hour and 40. We're at the 2 hour mark, by the way.
Oh,
But
jeez.
it is, yeah, exactly. But it is also hard to record. Yeah. Bill's got to give me time here.
Yeah.
And like here, he's a little bit busy. So Bill, thank you so much, man. I'm really grateful for your time today. My hope is always that this goes by fast. And it seems like when I told you it was 2 hours, you're like, holy crap, that was fast.
Yeah.
That it's done that. We get to share a lot of fun stories from your past and some
Mhm.
connections. We were in the same class, didn't even know. He probably cheated off of my notes, by the way, now that I think about it, in that class back in
Probably.
Boise State. Yeah, probably. But really just so thankful for you, Bill. We're excited to see the future continue to grow with you at the helm there, and just excited and grateful that you joined us here today on the Gill Connections podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really enjoyed.
Absolutely. And there we had an audio glitch right at the very end. So that's okay. That's what, if it's going to happen, happen at the very end. Thank you for being here and listening. Again, as we continue here with season 5 here in 2024, we're going to continue bringing up some amazing people like Bill here. This was a fun and fascinating journey. He doesn't know it, but he plugged what we just did. So back in January, we had the Baylor 4x4 podcast. He brought up Baylor. I love that he did that. It's just natural. So I hope you checked out that series, and check out here coming soon in April and May. We'll have a bonus episode every day. We're going to do every high school state. So Alabama through Wyoming, we're going to have a high school coach come on and talk to us and teach us how they qualify for the outdoor state meet. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss that. It is super interesting what we're doing amongst the different states. It's wild out there, wild, wild west time out there, and you get to learn and have conversation around that. So thank you for being here today. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again as we invite another amazing coach here to uplift and honor on the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast. See you, everybody.